How I would describe poetry to my dog, I'd say it's that smell that you follow to the dead squirrel that you want to roll in. That's how I'd explain it to my dog. That it's something that you kind of follow and stay behind. You know, it's not something people write poetry, but I don't think they necessarily invent it. I think it's something about following this thing. It took me a long time to realize that I shouldn't try to understand poetry by reading it like this. That the way to do it actually is to memorize. If you can memorize it, it's good for your brain to memorize stuff anyway. But when it's in your head, like it's a piece of memory, then it can come to you, sort of like a song will get stuck in your head. Instead, you can have poetry, and you can start to see how the back of the mind uses it. But I wasted a whole lot of time trying to understand poetry by just staring at it. I didn't realize that it's this living thing, and it's like if you can have it when you're in a bar or you're in the bathtub or at the barbecue, or anything that begins with B, and have the same poem in different circumstances. You can see how living it is and how useful it is. Poetry really started to affect me in junior high school. When people were starting to write about, I think there was this one anthology of high school students' poems called Mad, Sad, and Glad. I still remember poems from that book. And it was the first time I realized you could write about trouble. You could write about trouble in this way that where you didn't even have to spell out all the trouble, you could even just list the things that were around you when you were in a state of trouble. So when I realized that this was a way to deal with trouble, I was very, very in love with it. And for me, when I started to understand that an image, like it was haiku, that really, at first when you hear about haiku, you think it's a syllable exercise. You know what you think? You know, it's like, what is it, 5, 7, 5. And but then I realized that no, it's actually an image. It's the same thing as when you're walking down the street and you suddenly smell the smell and there's your Aunt Kathy's basement. That those little tiny images, and they don't always mean the same thing every day. There's this one poem, I think it's Basho, it's a haiku, and I can't remember that, and I like them when they're translated and they don't try to translate them into haiku form. But the image is of a cricket that's on a log that's going down a river and the cricket's singing. And one day I looked at that and I thought, yeah, that's right, we're all gonna die and I'm singing and I'm on here and that's cool. And then, yay. And then a couple days later, it seemed like the saddest image in the world and I just started crying when I thought of it. But that little image has come back over and over again of just this cricket singing on a log that's going down a stream. And you can't wear poetry out. You can't wear it out. But I really think the secret is to memorize it. It makes all the difference in the world. And the person that I used to lie about understanding was Emily Dickinson. I just lied. You know what I mean? Because I love Emily Dickinson, and I'd be like trying really hard to figure her out. And when I realized that if I started to memorize her work, then the thing just unfolds, you know? It's like food coloring where you only need a little bit of drop, a little drop to make this thing. So that helps. And one of the ways to memorize poetry is to put it to music. And music and memorization and poetry, I think, really go well together. And one of the things, I know that people talk about Emily Dickinson, they talk about the Yellow Rose of Texas that you can, but it's actually her cadence, which is really weird, will be in Gershwin, that Gershwin that goes dun 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 dun. I felt a cleaving in my mind as if my brain had split. I tried to match them seam by seam, but could not make them fit. But that same thing will be Girl from Ipanema. I felt a cleaving in my mind as if my brain had split. And when I started to see that whatever weird cadence that she has repeats, not just in, it'll repeat in Girl from Ipanema or Gershwin. Like, how the hell's that working? What is that? That's the other thing about memorizing poems, is that you think they mean one thing, and they do. They mean that thing exactly until some other experience happens to you, and then the poem can switch to the opposite meaning. But it can't do that if you only read it once. And there's something about memorizing it, and I've always felt really envious of people maybe who are a little older than me who grew up in England, because there's a whole push to memorize a lot of poetry, so they just can quote poetry like hell, like any time, But I do think that there is another world, and it's not a supernatural world. I always say it's just a supernatural world, which is the image world. And if you think about Emily Dickinson, she's a perfect example. Here's somebody who made these little poems, and I don't know if you've ever seen her handwriting, but wouldn't you expect her handwriting to be this, like, the loneliness we dare not sound, that you'd think it'd be like, writing's a mess. It's like sideways, it's all up and down. I mean, you really can't believe what a mess it is. But here she is, she's in her place a long time ago, writes these little poems, only a few of them are seen. She read what in the anthology, it's like over 1,700 poems. And then the idea that they travel through time intact, or that there's a poem that I use a lot by Rumi that was, I think it's like from the 13th century. Like, how the hell is that? Where you can have an image that travels through time intact. And that's one of the things poetry can do. It can time travel. And we can't. But the idea that Emily Dickinson did these things, and she wrote these poems to stay alive. She did. I mean, why else the hell would you do it, And she clearly understands something about loneliness and depression and trouble. And the best, strongest work is somehow about that. It's somehow about anxiety or about trouble. And the idea that she could write these poems and then I could stare at them forever until one day I realized, why don't you try memorizing? Because they're 4 lines. Come on, I bet you can do it. And then to have this whole thing open up, where it's like suddenly it's like you have a pen that you can write anything with, or that whatever mood that you're in, whatever mood you're in, she has a poem for it. My feeling is that people, for some reason, treat poetry like it's just a decoration. Like it's this little decoration that you can live without. But you know who knows that poetry works? Are the advertisers. Even they can do the stupidest rhyme. We're having beefaroni. It's made with macaroni. Beefaroni's really neat. Beefaroni's full of meat. You know what I mean? And they'll do it to a little song, and you'll remember it. So they understand something about that, about delivering an image. But for some reason, we think, poetry's just this thing you do on the side after you get your math done or your science done. Same thing with writing or any of the things that we call the arts. There's this idea that they're just an elective, they're just decoration, and they have nothing to do with our survival, or why we're here on this, why we can stand to be here. Like, that's the reason why I've made it to 53, is because of finding that these things that poetry or painting or plays contain, that's the stuff of mental health, and we ignore it at our peril.